Hello and welcome to another edition of Labor's Worldview. I'm your host, David Johnson, here today with my co-host, Jim Eyeman.
Hi, guys. We're back again, and we're really excited today. Coming up this Thursday is a big demonstration to welcome the great president from or governor of the great state of Indiana. I'm going to talk to you later about this, but first of all, I'm going to turn you over to one of the two guests we have. This is first Chad Anderson of the International Painters and Allied Workers Union.
I'm Chad Anderson with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. I represent painters and glazers with District Council 58.
Okay, and Matt, did you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, I'm Matt Langendorf with Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, Local 149 of the United Association. I'm our business manager there.
Okay, well, it looks like there's going to be quite an event coming up here on this coming Thursday, on the 19th, and you want to talk a little bit about this rally and demonstration?
Certainly. Chad and Larry Swope and I got together when we found out that the Champaign County Republicans had invited Mitch Daniels, and we thought we would like to welcome him here in an appropriate manner after the things that he did to the working class people of Indiana. We didn't feel like it was appropriate to have him here.
Okay, and what is it exactly that Governor Mitch Daniels of Indiana did to working people over in the state of Indiana recently?
Well, after having been quoted over and over as saying that he was happy with Indiana's labor laws when it was time for him to get elected, he quickly turned on that and really gutted what the folks of Indiana were counting on to make a living.
Okay, and basically what he did was he imposed a right-to-work state in Indiana, which really a lot of people have called it right to work for less. The name, it's amazing, the name, you know, right to work. It sounds like a great thing, actually. Can you talk a little bit about what right to work really means?
Yeah, that I can. That I can. Right to work is an excellent brand on a poison, is what it is. Everybody in the United States has the right to work. They put a name on this that you would think that people who represent working people like Chad and I would be in favor of, when the fact is it's really nothing more than a Republican ploy to cut off funding to the Democratic Party and in the process provide cheap labor to big corporate America.
Now, also, if I understand about right-to-work states, that it makes it more difficult for unions to collect dues from their members, and it makes it more difficult for workers to join a union. How would this, now we hear about this a lot in the public sector, how would this adversely affect the building trades? I mean, what do you know about conditions over in Indiana for construction workers, union construction workers, and non-union for that matter, too?
Well, a lot of municipalities actually do hire construction workers directly to do their work, not just contracted out. Many municipalities prefer to have building trades experts on their staff full time, so that they're there on the ready and don't have to have a contract for every single project that needs done. Mm-hmm. So we will be directly affected, and that's also a misnomer. A lot of people don't think it'll affect the building trades. It certainly will. Okay.
Now, it's amazing how much money, corporate money was behind this. I mean, in fact, if I remember correctly, they were talking about, oh, we got to do this before the Super Bowl because it's just critical. We have to do this before the Super Bowl. Like creating this thing that like a crisis almost, a manufactured crisis in order to try to get this pushed through the legislature in Indiana. And you know, of course, we see that it's just an attempt that makes it easier for non-union employers to pay their workers less. And this rally you guys have been organizing, that's going to take place here Thursday. This is basically why there's going to be all these people coming from all over the state of Illinois, and I understand other neighboring states as well. So, I mean, Jim, what is it that you think would be an appropriate thing as far as what the people need to talk about as far as when anybody's asking about right to work?
Well, it's right to work for minimum wage, or it's right to work for nothing, basically. It makes it almost impossible to organize unions and to keep them. It's basically the same thing without that the Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin has done, without calling it right to work, which caused all the demonstrations in the Wisconsin uprising a year ago, February. But the same thing happened in Indiana as well. Democratic Party congressmen, state congresspersons, left in order to not have a quorum to be able to vote this stuff through. But Daniels was successful anyway, and I'd be interested in hearing how he got that despite all the opposition in the state legislature from you guys.
You want to handle that, or you want me to, Chad?
Handle that.
Okay. I'll be glad to handle that one because I talked to some of those Indiana legislators that were fleeing the state to try to prevent that vote.
And hiding out here in Urbana, actually, from
And they were hiding out here in Urbana, and they were coaxed back on the agreement that that topic would not reach a vote, and that topic darn sure reached a vote just as soon as they got back there. So what they were agreed to and what the reality became was totally different.
Yeah, in fact, we had one of those state legislatures on our show. David, I can't remember his last name, but he's actually a union plumbing contractor from up by South Bend, and he was a very persuasive, speaker. I mean, he really understood the importance of prevailing wage laws for the state of Indiana. I mean, and this guy's an employer, no less. It's interesting. So you have a lot of even employers who are against this. And so I guess the question is, who benefits from these right-to-work laws, really?
I'd like to answer that one too, Chad, if that's all right.
That's all right.
Employers that don't want to treat their workers with any dignity. There are a whole lot of employers that really, really want this legislation for the right reasons, and there are a whole lot of I think I've got that backward. A lot of employers don't want right-to-work legislation because they insist on treating their people fairly, and they would like their competitors to treat their employees fairly. The very good contractors that are well organized and reward a job well done absolutely want to keep their people.
Okay.
It's important to understand, too, some statistics about right-to-work states. They have more injuries on the job. They get 5 to 7% less wages and less representation with management. Now, when this happens, you have employees that just don't really want to work under these conditions. Your productivity goes down. But they don't get this. They're getting less productivity rather than treating their workers right, giving them a living wage with good health care. But no, it's all about cash now. Immediate gratification in the bank, in my pocket. This is what it's all about. It's profits first, people last, I would say.
Yeah, now, of course, this seems like it's just another chapter, if you will, in this ongoing battle that's been happening here for the last couple of years. Wisconsin, Ohio, Indiana now, and even Missouri now. Chad, you've been to all these places from what I understand.
Yeah, I went to Wisconsin on the recall. I worked on recall of Hopper up there.
Walker, yeah.
And we were up there for 10 days working on that.
And this is a recall election to recall Governor Scott Walker?
No, it was on the recall of the politicians up there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were up there for 10 days. Our international sent 40 people there to help out with that. Then we went to Ohio and worked Columbus, Cincinnati, and Cleveland there.
Now, that governor in Ohio, his name John Kasich.
John Kasich.
He's, I guess, kindred spirit to Governor Scott Walker in Wisconsin, it seems like.
Yes, and it was on Senate Bill 5 there.
Okay.
And they, the people voted, and they voted that they didn't want it.
So you guys mobilized to basically overturn Governor Kasich's anti-union legislation, basically?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that was one of those successes. And of course now, Jim, you're from Wisconsin, of course, originally. Have you been hearing from any of your co-workers
Yes.
in Wisconsin about this recall election on Governor Scott Walker?
Yes, I've talked to several of them, and they put in a lot of hours, to get the petitions. We've got, of course, the election's going to happen. I believe it's the recall, June 2nd. And Walker doesn't have a chance. Almost 2 million signatures they got up there to recall him. I mean, it's really unprecedented. So we're pretty excited about it. The people of Wisconsin are excited about it. I have never thought that Wisconsin would rise up the way it did last year. I mean, it just really impressed me. Out there in the snow, 24 hours a day, it was just wonderful. So yeah, I think it's pretty much of a given, but given the electoral machine, now anything could happen. But we're pretty sure he's out.
Jim, and interesting, if I could further your point on that, with Governor Daniels, is that on the surface, to be truthful with you, I had always supported term limits. I thought that was something that would be very good for state, local, and federal elections. But truly, in this case, it caused a lot of the problem in Indiana because certainly Mitch Daniels didn't have the nerve to do this to his constituents until he was in his final term. If he were being faced with being reelected, I assure you he would have never done this. So I found it interesting that while most of us believe in term limits, in this case, they have darn sure caused a problem that wouldn't be there if he were running for election next term. So I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. Well, Indiana doesn't have a right to recall act in their state constitution, I don't believe, which Wisconsin does. Mm-hmm. So this is probably something every state ought to have the right to do. When they get out of line, get them out of office. You don't have to wait 4 years or 2 years or whatever to do it. They pull something like this. Walker came into office, didn't tell anybody what his agenda was. In fact, his agenda sounded pretty good. That's why he got elected, and turned right around and did the exact opposite. Not that he's the only one that's ever done that before, without going into a long list of names, but nevertheless, and then that's one of Wisconsin's good laws that was passed back in the days of fighting Bob La Follette and the populist movement in Wisconsin.
Now, we were talking before the show, and Matt, you were talking about a provision of the right to work law, Article 10, which is particularly bad. Can you talk a little bit about Article 10?
Yeah, when you read down Article 10 from the Wisconsin legislature, it's nothing but beating down workers and cutting off Democratic funding. There's no real saving there. They've blamed this on the budget. There's no budget saving there. This is partisan politics with working people in the crossfire, with the middle class in jeopardy again in this country, and it's just sad. Sad that partisan politics would beat down hard-working families.
You know, it's amazing. But anyway, I wanted to just talk a little about this rally coming up on Thursday. Could you tell our viewers, first of all, when, what time, and where people could turn out for this rally on Thursday, this coming Thursday?
Absolutely. The rally starts Thursday the 19th at 3 p.m. in the southwest quadrant of the Assembly Hall parking lot. There will be car parking available in the northwest quadrant of the Assembly Hall parking lot. We'll also be parking buses in a third quadrant of the parking lot. We will have speakers and a rally take place there at the Assembly Hall, and then at 5:15 we'll march down to the rally site and begin the rally there to welcome Indiana Governor Daniels.
Now, Chad, I mean, I went to a meeting. There was a meeting today of the organizing committee for this, and just hearing some of the stories, could you share those with our viewers about the people that are, all the groups and unions and individuals that are coming to this? I mean, it sounds like it's going to be quite a turnout.
Yeah, there's quite a few people we've heard coming in. We've heard buses from about every city in the state of Illinois. Got buses coming in. There's buses from Indiana. We've heard vans from Wisconsin, people from Missouri. I mean, everybody realizes this is a serious issue. We got to stand up for it before it's on our back door, like everybody else has been through in Indiana, Ohio, Missouri, Wisconsin.
I mean, it almost seems like Illinois is kind of an island in this assault. I mean, so far, it hasn't happened here, but of course, considering it's happened in every state next door to us and beyond, it seems like this is kind of like the last fortress, if you will, of unionism.
And that's true. That's absolutely true. If two of our counterparts from Indiana were sitting here with you, they'd tell you, and they've told us over and over, that 2 years ago they never had any idea that this might happen in Indiana. If the union members and the middle class people of, whether they're union members or not, if we are complacent, if we think this can't happen here, then believe me, it will.
Now, it's amazing that there's a lot of, disinformation out there. In other words, there's talk about how right to work actually helps, all workers and all this and that. But isn't it true that when you have a strong union state like Illinois, that the average wage for a non-union worker is higher than, say, in a state where there's right to work legislation?
Yeah, there's no question that when they poll the states that are prevailing wage states and they poll the right to work states have significantly less percentage of people that are insured for health when they're children. The wages are obviously lower. They're less likely to have a pension to live on. All those things are things that feed taxes. All those things develop a community.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't imagine that for everything the middle class shoulders right now, that any group of people in this country could conscionably saddle them with more and ask them to do more, particularly in the middle of this recession.
Now, Jim, who's some of the people, the players behind this nationwide? We've heard a little bit about the Koch brothers. Can you explain a little about
the mysterious Koch brothers? Well, there is a thing called ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, that drafts up legislation that they think would benefit the states, that is to say, the ruling class of America, the Koch brothers, Dick Armey, basically the Tea Party backers, and the right wing in America. The Israel lobby is involved in that. A lot of people have been pulling out of this. Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, the Gates Foundation now is pulled out of it. It's getting to be too well known around the country that they're just a bunch of bad dogs, buddy. I'll tell you that.
Well, that's interesting that even a lot of corporations are starting to pull out of this. This tells you how unsavory they are, evidently. But listen, yes, go ahead.
Well, just getting back to
yes.
to ALEC.
Yes.
Besides right to work, drafting various types of right to work laws that would be applicable in one state or another. Iowa, they're trying it there too. This stand your ground law that's implemented in Florida comes out of ALEC too. This was the law that Zimmerman is standing on in his defense for shooting this 17-year-old black high school kid, Trayvon Martin, down there. So you can say it's stand your ground. It's really the right to shoot first is what it is. And it's just like all this stuff seems to be coming out of this one cesspool think tank. Alec.
Yeah, I tell you, it just amazes me. Prevailing wage laws were enacted back in the 1930s. I think the first place was in New York City, because what was happening is all these state and city-funded projects were going to these fly-by-night contractors, mainly coming up from the South, who were bringing their crews with them, building little shanty towns for their workers on the job sites, and basically taking all this money from the taxpayers of the city of New York and the state of New York, and basically leaving the state with it then. In other words, virtually none of this money was spent in the local economies. Now, of course, Matt was talking about this earlier. That's one of the benefits that's been proven over the last decades, is that when you have prevailing wage laws and a strong unionization, that you create favorable conditions for a good economy. In other words, the money stays in the community, where people that earn union wages are able to buy cars, homes, clothing, appliances, as opposed to a worker that's hardly making any money, that can barely afford to keep a roof over his head and put food on the table. So, it's been proven that these prevailing wage laws actually help over everyone in local economies and stuff, and why, some group of corporate interests would want to overturn them. I mean, it doesn't even make sense to seem like it really is in their best interest for the long run. But anyway, Matt, now you brought some commercials that you've been running locally here on the local Fox affiliate, and also it's been broadcast on Comcast. Can you talk a little about those?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Throughout history, we've had a lot of Republican presidents that supported labor. That seems to have gone by the wayside at this point, and we'd just like to remind people that Chad and I, we're bipartisan. We don't care what letter you put next to your name. If you support working people, we're for you, and if you don't, we're not.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at these commercial clips, and we'll be right back in just a second.
I see in the near future a crisis approaching that unnerves me and causes me to tremble for the safety of my country. Corporations have been enthroned. An era of corruption in high places will follow, and the money power of the country will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of the people, until the wealth is aggregated in a few hands and the republic destroyed. Abraham Lincoln, letter to Colonel William F. Elkins, November 21st, 1864.
Now, I imagine probably
This
very
has been
few
going on
people paid that 93% tax rate. However, I'm sure there were conditions to where they had to create jobs in order to not pay that rate. Is that correct? Or, I mean, that's just kind of my guess, I would imagine.
Are we back on camera? Okay, we're back on camera. Yes, David, you're right. These, now Eisenhower was going, Reagan really, the Reagan Revolution was really a Reagan counter-revolution against Roosevelt's New Deal. And it was masterfully done. I mean, you have to give the devil his due here. So unionism has gone down to less than 7%, just pushing 7%, where before Reagan, it was nearly 37%. And was pretty much holding stable. We've lost our unions, we've lost our income. Kids can't graduating from college now can't find a job, so they can't pay off their dues. Student tuition is the greatest source of debt in the country. It surpassed last year. It surpassed credit card debt. People are maxed out on their credit anyway now. They can't borrow anymore. We've gone to this borrowing economy. So General Motors came up with this with the GMAC, with their insurance company, which actually turned out to be a bank. Well, that's okay. We're going to drop your wages, but we'll loan you the money. So, I mean, it's stuff like this. And why do we fall for it? Why has our trade unions not been able to warn their constituents what is going on? We have these, every union's got a political action committee. Okay, what's the political action? Are they doing anything? No. They're trying to pump money into the Democratic Party coffers, and they're turning right around and selling us out. You know, and we keep going farther and farther and farther to the right. The working class status keeps going lower and lower. The politics in this country, Eisenhower was to the left of the Democratic Party today on almost all questions. I mean, it's getting scary out there. I mean, I don't know who runs the country anymore. I think it's the Supreme Court in Wall Street, David.
Well, that was quite a rant, Jim, and I'll tell you what, you know, we've had the debate on this, you know, quite often on the show, and we've had guests, you know, one side or the other, but yeah, you know, it seems like with things like that are happening, like with this rally locally, is that I think a lot of, you know, a lot of people have gotten complacent. I mean, workers in general, and even, you know, some of our, you know, higher labor leadership nationally, and I think they're coming to realize, though, that you know, it's not just going to be about throwing money at the Democratic Party anymore. That basically members and the unions and working people in general have got to get out there and get active and if necessary, get in the streets. I mean, and I think this is this rally that's going to happen Thursday is a good. You know, is a good indication of this. I mean, because, you know, it seems like there's going to be, if people are coming from Wisconsin and Indiana, Kentucky and Missouri for this, to Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, I mean, what does that tell you? That tells you that, you know, they know they've lost ground and they want to make sure that we don't lose ground like they have, because, of course, it's not, the game's not over yet. And, of course, there's going to be lots of efforts to take back what they've lost in the states like Wisconsin and Indiana, but they want to make sure that Illinois doesn't go the same way. So, again, this rally that's going to be coming Thursday, it starts at, people are going to start assembling at 3 o'clock, and it looks like speakers are going to start speaking at about 4, and then about 5:15, the march is going to go from this south, well, basically the Assembly Hall parking lot to the Hilton Gardens on the corner of Neal and Kirby. Now, let me ask you, Matt and Chad, I know that you guys have also kind of talked to the local police about this, probably more than once, about trying to get, you know, permits or whatever. What were the police like in Champaign to deal with on this?
Well, they were really nervous at first because of the size of the group that we were coming, which is why we went and met with them. We sure didn't want any of this to be a surprise. We wanted to have it planned out. We wanted it orderly. We wanted it to be well organized. And as soon as we explained to them that our goal here was to impress this community, and that our goal here was to just show folks that we do care and that we are watching and that we don't want this type of thing in our community, immediately they began to help us make the proper arrangements to make this thing flow a little bit. Their idea was, if all these folks are coming here, we'd better be prepared for them, and we'd better give them a place to do their thing. And I don't mean give them, but we'd better find a place for them to do their thing. And I would like to get back to Jim's point just for a little bit of backtracking.
Sure.
A lot of this worker beating down is coming and with the excuse that the workers are making too much money for the market to bear, and that the unions are to blame for that. And if the unions only make up 7% of the workers in the United States today, how could that be the case? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, that's in the private sector, of course, yes. But
prevailing wage laws are built in for Chad and I. They're built-in safeguards so that the people that work in those areas go to work first, and then if and when, the rare occasion that all of those folks have a job and there are no workers in that field available, we reach out to the nearest communities to us for workers that are out of work there. The prevailing wage law protects the taxpayer from a department head, for example, hiring his brother-in-law to come in and do work that isn't done. Work has to be done by skilled, trained people in that industry. under the prevailing wage law. Here in Illinois, you have to have a Department of Labor certified training program to be eligible to perform work on state-funded projects here. Why would anyone not want to do that? In another instance, I hear people say that only union people can work on a prevailing wage job, and that is just not true. The fact of the matter is that most of these employers who don't treat their people the way they should be treated are afraid to bid that kind of work because they don't get their folks trained and they don't have safety programs, they don't have apprenticeship programs. They have every right to bid that work just the same as everybody else.
That's right. But you're making a good point, Matt, in that this idea that unions drive down, are driving jobs away, and that the people that work that are non-union don't get the prevailing wage. That's absolutely, they get the prevailing wage. This is what unions are good for. And even in places like that you have AFSCME, where AFSCME has a contract, people don't necessarily have to join the union. They still have to pay a share. This is, for example, my son's case. He's an AFSCME in the library, at Berkeley Public Library in California. And they still have to pay, not quite dues, but in order to get that protection. And I think that's only fair. So this has been very difficult for the working class since Reagan. It's been really a problem. And what's happening now is that, especially since the Occupy movement, which began right after the revolt in Wisconsin against Scott Walker, is that labor and the youth are back in the streets. And I haven't seen this since the 60s. And I don't want to sound pessimistic here by how bad things have gotten under Reagan, because there is a chance. There's a sparkle in the youth's eye, even though they know they'll never get a job that they can retire on. And it's like they realize this, but they're gonna fight anyway. They're just not going into retirement and crying and getting drunk or smoking pot or whatever and not paying attention. They're not apathetic. It was the generation between my generation and the youth today that became apathetic and took everything for granted. Middle class values, which arguably is serve yourself and screw your buddy, rather than working class values, which is solidarity forever. Working class values are back. It was middle class values essentially that put everybody to sleep in this last period. I got mine, hope you got yours. Well, sorry, they're taking it away from everybody now. That dream, that bubble has burst.
Jim, they were able to convince the working people of Oklahoma that there would be more jobs if they were a right-to-work state. And maybe they'd make a little less doing them, but all of them would have a job. And they drank that Kool-Aid. Now we've had enough time to make a good sample out of Oklahoma, and you find out that their unemployment's up, that they have less businesses in Oklahoma than they did when they went right to work. The lure out there that, well, you were laid off for a good long time, and if we were right to work, you wouldn't have been, just isn't true. It's a blatant lie to the American people.
Yeah, the statistics prove that right to work does not create more jobs. Absolutely not. It creates less jobs, actually, at lower wages and less benefits. But, it's interesting. The building trades, going back to the, starting back in the 1870s and 1880s, were the ones that went out there and eventually were the ones behind the 8-hour day. Because back then, it was common for people to work 60, 70 hours a day. 12 hours a day or more sometimes. And it was the building trades that, especially in Chicago in 1881, that actually shut the whole city down for a whole day and marched up Michigan Avenue. And their chant was 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, 8 hours for what you will. And this has been the tradition of the building trades. And if you think about it, it's because of the building trades that not only we got the 8-hour day, of course, we're starting to lose it again. That's why we need to fight back. But they're also the ones that brought us the weekend because it was typical in those days to work 6 days a week. You'd only get Sunday off to go to church. So, you know, this is important that, you know, we need to start getting that spirit back, in my opinion. But one more time, guys, tell everybody where they'd like to come out. If they'd like to come out and greet the governor from Indiana, Mitch Daniels, where they need to be and when.
Gathering start at 3 o'clock at Assembly Hall parking lot.
And that's on Thursday?
Yes, that's on Thursday, April 19th.
Okay.
And the speakers will be from 4 to 5:15. And then at 5:15, everybody will march from the Assembly Hall parking lot to the Hilton Garden on the corner of Kirby and Neal Street.
Well, this is going to be interesting. If there's as many people coming as there seems to be buses coming, I mean, wow, this is going to be quite an event down there on the corner of Neal and Kirby on Thursday. Okay, Jim, any more last questions you have for our guests?
Okay, if we're gonna end up, well, now, we were talking before the show about the apathy in this period, and do you think the Arab Spring, what happened in Madison, and all this, has changed your fellow workers' outlook? I mean, it seems like it around here. You know, that's happened. Are people looking at things different?
I think it's woke everybody up. Everybody was relaxed and didn't think anything could happen to them, and now it's reality. And
one other thing that I found interesting, I think it was in 1961, the Martin Luther King's quote was very similar to this: beware of false slogans like right to work. It sounds like something we'd like to have, but it's nothing but stripping our rights. Martin Luther King saw this coming in '61, and he read right through it. There's an excellent quote from Martin Luther King on that.
Yes, increasingly at the end, King was talking about the poor and the working class, and not exclusively race. And this is really quite important. And even though, and Malcolm X was making a transition too. In many ways, they were coming together. And when they did finally join hands and shook hands, it was J. Edgar Hoover's worst nightmare.
Well,
Hoover followed. Seriously, I mean, this is documented. He said this is just impossible. For the United States won't withstand an alliance of these two men.
I think that's a good point, Jim. I mean, of course, there's a lot of corporate interests in this country that want to see us fighting each other over little crumbs of bread they throw out there, and you know, we can't let that happen. So, guys, thank you so much for coming on Labor's Worldview, Chad and Matt, and tune in next week for another edition of Labor's Worldview. And until then, be safe. And Jim, one last comment?
Yes, always. Cluck, old hen, cluck 610. The Dow Jones average is down again. You've been watching all week. Plumbing down. Double dip recession. Be careful. Stay left. Stay strong, kids.
Okay, that does it for another issue of Labor's Worldview. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.